This is Sandy Acre Lock and Sandy Acre Lock Cottage, which featured in my first few videos before COVID necessitated a name change to the channel. I wanted to visit there again as the cottage is occasionally open to the public, but this time I couldn't arrive by cabin cruiser as the Swamp Duck is firmly based on the Ashby Canal, so I decided to arrive by kayak, but things didn't go according to plan.
If I had a boat and oceans to cross, then I would sail them, since I have this promise to keep.
Today I set off to take the Swamp Duckling down to the Erewash Canal and do the next part of my journey towards Sandy Acre Lock and to the Sandy Acre Lock Cottage. However, having set the kayak up, I discovered a couple of holes. I couldn't really fix it at the side of the canal because I couldn't hear very well at all and to discover where exactly the holes were. But one is on the side, just here, and one is on the bottom, just here. When I bought the Swamp Duckling, I bought some of this, which is Storm Shore, a flexible repair adhesive, and it also comes with some of these sort of plastic plasters. So depending where the hole is, depends which you use. The tape I can use on the side here because it's easy to get at and there's no ridges, whereas this one here is on a ridge, so I need to just use some of this. Now the tape is an instant repair, but this takes 12 hours for it to go off and form a proper seal. So I've applied some of this to this part here on the little ridge here, and I've put some of the tape on here. So it's a question of leaving it now for 12 hours to make sure it's all set. The very first repair that I had to make to the Swamp Duckling was at the end of 2021 when I was doing some filming on the Ashby Canal, and I discovered that right at the front of the boat, on the inside, at the top of a seam, there was a slight split. So I used a rubber seal from a bicycle repair outfit, and I used some of the plastic tape to put over the top of it, and that seemed to make a very good repair, and I didn't have any problems with it for a while. And then I discovered those two holes in it the other day. They have both since been repaired. This is the one on the side. I used some of the adhesive on first of all, allowed that to dry for 12 hours, and then I've put a piece of the tape over the top. That was quite easy to do, and I can understand there being a puncture there, because when you're scraping up against the side of a canal, there may be the odd thing that's going to stick out and penetrate this. So that I can understand. Now the next one was on the bottom of the boat, just here. And again, it's feasible that something may have punctured that. However, when you look at it closely, it's on this seam, and it looks very much as though this seam has split. So I had to use some of the adhesive, and again I've put a plastic tape over the top of it. So that was another sort of 12 hours worth of waiting for that. So I managed to get those two holes that I discovered from my failed trip on the Erewash Canal. I managed to get those fixed, and then I inflated it again, And having inflated it, I discovered there was yet another leak on the bottom part of the boat, but inside again. And again, it's on one of the seams and right at the top. And that corresponds with the first one that I mended before Christmas. So it seems that these are quite a weak spot. Now, having looked at the manufacturer's instructions and looking at one or two videos on YouTube, I discovered that this is quite a common fault. And the problem can be related to overinflation. This kayak should be inflated with a pressure of 1.0 pounds per square inch. So how do you know that? The pump that comes with it has no pressure gauge on it, so there's no way of using that to find out. But what they do give you is this little piece of plastic which has a line on it, and it goes from 0 to 5 centimeters to 10 centimeters. On the bottom of the boat is the same little diagram. So what you're supposed to do is to line this up and you'll see that the black line exceeds the white line by about 5 millimeters. So you then pump the bottom up, and when the black line meets the white line, that's time to stop. This method is repeated again for each of the sides. However, with the boat deflated, if you line up the black with the white, what you discover is that there's only, I would think, 2 millimeters difference. So let's see what happens when we pump the chambers up. Now I've pumped up the bottom chamber to try and get those points to match, which they do. It didn't take many pumps to get that into the right place. This next bit is difficult to film and to administer, but I have got them lined up. The trouble is, this marker is on the inside of the tube and almost underneath, so it's quite difficult to do. But you can see that I have exceeded the black line by about 3 millimeters, and yet the boat, it is still quite squidgy. And according to that marker, I really should let some air out. Now I've done this so that both the lines meet up by letting some air out, but you can just see that our whole thing is quite squidgy, and that is not going to be very, very stable or rigid. So I think this method of knowing how much air you've pumped into the cylinders is quite poor. So I think this highlights one of the major problems with this kayak, is this method of working out the air pressure, because that just seems really soft to me. So there is a tendency to put more air in than you're supposed to, and that's where the problem arises with the splitting, especially if it's a hot day and the kayak is in sunlight. Then the air inside there will expand quite considerably. And they do advise, even with the more expensive ones, that if you leave a kayak like these in sunlight, then you should take some air out of them. That's why you need to take the pump with you, so that when you set off again and put it into the cold water, you've pumped it up a little bit. So that's a problem with these kayaks, and I think that's where I've gone wrong. I think with the splits in the material, that it's so easy to overpump them. I know when I bought this kayak last year, during the third lockdown in the UK, that these were way overpriced. That's because the suppliers to Amazon and places like that were cashing in on the COVID situation. Here in the UK, you could take part in water sports and things long before you could do other things. And so a lot of people opted to buy kayaks and things like this in order to get out and do some recreational activities. So the price increased and the manufacturers cashed in on COVID. So I know that I paid well over what this was actually worth. I paid £234 for it, and really they're not worth that. At the moment they are £168, and they have been a lot lower than that even. So that was a bit of a blow, to think that I've bought something that's really not that fantastic quality, especially when you look at that gauge for working out the pressure. But I have managed to get it all fixed now, and there are no more leaks in it. I've had it up for a few days in here, and there's no more leaks. So my advice to anybody with one of these, or buying one of these, just make sure that you don't overinflate it, because that's when you start having problems with splits on the seams. I was quite happy to buy this kayak. I didn't really want to spend a lot of money, because obviously the better models were even more expensive at the time. I just wanted to see whether I would enjoy doing this kind of thing. And you'll know from my vlogs that from about 5 minutes in, I was hooked on this, and I think it's a really good thing to do. It gives you loads of exercise, and you see rivers and canals from a completely different perspective, even to when I'm sitting there on the swamp duck. You're really low down and you're with nature, and the photography and that you can do is really great. However, I don't think that this kayak is going to meet my needs going much further. One of the other issues I have with this kayak is that it has 3 different types of valves. It has these on the sides, that one on the floor, and these on the 2 ends. These are quite easy because they just undo and the air just comes out quite quickly. Whereas this one is one of these where you have to squeeze it in order to get the air out, and you can't let go of that, because as soon as you let go it seals it and the air stops coming out. So when you're trying to pack this away, this is not an easy thing to do. When you inflate these end pieces, you push the valve inside there to keep it out of the way. Now, as somebody who suffers with arthritis in my hands, I find these extremely difficult to use, especially when you've been kayaking and it's been wet and maybe your hands are very cold, and this is cold to touch as well. I find it quite hard to pull those out, and I've had to resort to using an implement such as a penknife and able to sort of lever those out, which when you've got this material around is maybe not best practice, but it is quite difficult to do, and you can't really get to it from underneath, not very easily, because it's too thick to get to them. So that I find a problem. Those valves there are the sort of thing you might have on a sunbed, and they're quite difficult to do. As you can see, today I made a trip with Steve to Decathlon in Nottingham to have a look at what kayaks they had on offer in there. And we've come away with a new kayak. This is a 2-person Itiwit kayak. It's slightly longer, about a foot longer than the last one, and it's 4 inches wider, but it weighs less, and that's down to the material that it is made of. The construction of the Itiwit kayaks is basically that they have an outer skin and then they have inner tubes that fit into that skin, which means that if you have a major problem, you don't have to replace the whole kayak, you can merely replace certain parts. They do have a after sales and workshop department to sort that out for you. In terms of cost, it was, under normal circumstances, another £125 on top of the last kayak, and it doesn't include paddles and it didn't include the pump. We have made a purchase of a pump, as this was one of the things that I was not happy about in the last kayak, and this pump has a gauge on it so you can tell how much pressure you're putting in, and in this kayak it can take 1.5 pounds per square inch, so it's going to be a lot more solid than the flip-floppy one that we had before, and a lot easier than messing around with little plastic strips trying to measure them up when you're trying to pump the thing up at the same time. So So hopefully this is going to make life a lot easier and even quicker to get the thing pumped up. It comes in a convenient carrying case which has got some straps so you can strap it to your back, so that should make moving it from the car to the side of the river or the canal a little easier. We'll have a look at some of the much better features on this one compared to the last one. So I've just taken the Itiwit out of its bag. It's a little bit longer than the Explorer, but not significantly. It's about just over a foot longer. And I've checked the contents of the bag, and it's got the instruction booklet with the puncture repair outfit, which I'm hoping I will never need. And it has a bag with 3 skegs in it. Now this Kayak has 3 skegs. They're obviously much smaller than the Explorer, which only had 1, but the 3 smaller ones, the way they're positioned, should be much better for tracking, and they won't collect as much weed as the Explorer did. It was forever getting lots of clumps of weed around it, and you had to just keep clearing it away. The Intex canoe had 9 valves in total, whereas this one has 5 in total. There are 3 for the actual canoe and 1 each for the 2 seats, and they're all of the screw type, so there's nothing for me to have to pull out with a penknife, so they're much more substantial. So I'm going to have a little go at blowing it up. I've now blown the base up, and I've got it to 1.5, and that seems absolutely rock solid. And you can see on the pump that you've got this gauge, which is a lot better and a lot easier to administer than that silly piece of plastic. As well as pumping air in, you can actually use this pump for deflating, so extracting the air, which will be good because it'll help you to get that last bit of air out so that you can actually fold the kayak up quite neatly. This is the Itiwit 2 inflated, and you do have loads of room between the seats, and there's some handy storage under there for a bag, and the same at the back. So the one thing I notice straight away is that you're sitting a lot higher than the Intex one. The sides seem lower at the side of you, which is going to be good for paddling. Now I'm 5'9" tall, or at least I always say 5'9½". Don't forget the half. But I can just stretch my legs out and don't have to bend them at all. It's very comfortable. All in all, I can't wait to get this out on the water and make that video that I intended to do in the first place. But I hope you found this useful. I certainly have. I only wish that I'd bought this in the first place, but at the time shops weren't always open and we were in lockdown, and so it was easier to shop online, but you didn't necessarily get the choice that you wanted. I hope you enjoyed that video. We are hoping that by the end of this week we will have taken the new kayak out and completed that journey down the Erewash Canal and visited the Sandy Acre Lock Cottage. Now I thought I would end this video with a Where Am I quiz. So if I just spin this around and let you have a look. Now I'm obviously at the coast, but whereabouts? The clue is, this is somewhere in God's own country. So you'll have to tune in to a future video to find out where I am. If you haven't yet subscribed, then please press the subscription button on the bottom right hand corner of the screen, which is displayed on a mobile phone or tablet throughout the video. And please press the bell icon on the home page of the channel and you'll be notified by YouTube each time I upload a new video. Please give us a thumbs up and make any comments below, as I do enjoy reading them and I will respond to each and every one of them. So thank you very much for watching and do take care.